One prophet stood against a kingdom of darkness. Before the rain returned, heaven would answer Israel with fire. Elijah, fire from heaven. For 3 years the heavens remained closed. Rivers disappeared, crops withered, and a nation cried out beneath a merciless sky. 3 years without rain. Israel abandons God. But the drought was more than a natural disaster. Israel had abandoned the Lord and bowed before Baal, the false god they believed controlled the rain and the harvest. Israel turned away from God. Jezebel's influence. Inside Ahab's palace, Queen Jezebel brought the worship of Baal into Israel's royal court. Under her influence, false priests multiplied and sacred altars were replaced. Jezebel, let every city raise an altar to Baal. Jezebel brought Baal worship to Israel. Elijah appears. Then, from the rugged hills of Gilead, an unknown prophet emerged. He possessed no army, carried no wealth, and feared no earthly king. His name was Elijah. Elijah confronts King Ahab. Elijah entered King Ahab's palace and delivered a declaration that would shake the kingdom. As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, there will be neither dew nor rain except at my word. Nitrogen monoxide. Dough, no rain. Elijah leaves Samaria. As the royal court erupted in anger, Elijah left Samaria and disappeared toward the wilderness. The king possessed soldiers and power, but he could not silence God's word. Elijah disappeared into the wilderness. The brook Cherith. The word of the Lord came to Elijah. Leave this place and hide beside the brook Cherith. You will drink from the stream, and I will provide food for you. God prepared a secret refuge. The brook dries up. After many days, the brook dried up because no rain had fallen. Elijah held the dust in his hands, but trusted that the God who sustained him had not abandoned him. The brook dried up. Ravens bring food. Morning and evening, ravens brought Elijah bread and meat. While the nation suffered beneath the drought, God faithfully sustained his servant beside the hidden stream. God provided in the wilderness. Journey to Zarephath. Then God directed Elijah toward Zarephath, where a widow would provide for him. Obediently, the prophet crossed the scorching wilderness and entered the homeland of Jezebel and Baal. God sent Elijah to Zarephath. The desperate widow. At the gate of Zarephath, Elijah found a widow gathering sticks beside her hungry son. He called to her, "Please bring me a little water and a piece of bread." A widow with almost nothing. Her final meal. The widow showed Elijah her nearly empty jar. "I have only a handful of flour and a little oil. I am preparing one final meal for my son and myself." Only one meal remained. Elijah's promise. Elijah answered, "Do not be afraid. Prepare the bread as I have asked. The flour will not be exhausted, and the oil will not run dry until rain returns. Do not be afraid." The miracle begins. The widow obeyed. When she reached into the jar again, flour remained. When she poured the oil, it continued to flow. Just as the Lord had promised through Elijah, the flour and oil did not run out. Bread of hope. Day after day, the widow prepared bread for Elijah and her son. In a land consumed by famine, their humble home never lacked flour or oil. God provided every day. Bread of hope. Day after day, the widow prepared bread for Elijah and her son. In a land consumed by famine, their humble home never lacked flour or oil. God provided every day. Bread of hope. Day after day, the widow prepared bread for Elijah and her son. In a land consumed by famine, their humble home never lacked flour or oil. God provided every day. Into the upper room. Elijah said, "Give me your son." He carried the child into the upper room, laid him upon the bed, and prepared to plead with God. Elijah took him upstairs. Elijah cries out to God. Alone in the upper room, Elijah cried out, "O Lord my God, why has tragedy fallen upon this widow who welcomed me into her home? O Lord, hear my prayer." The threefold prayer. 3 times Elijah stretched himself beside the child and pleaded, "O Lord my God, let this child's life return to him. Lord, let his life return." The threefold prayer. 3 times Elijah stretched himself beside the child and pleaded, "O Lord my God, let this child's life return to him. Lord, let his life return. Your son is alive." Elijah carried the boy downstairs and placed him in his mother's arms. "Look," he declared, "your son is alive." Her grief disappeared into overwhelming joy. "Your son is alive." The widow believes. The widow looked at Elijah and declared, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is truth." God sends Elijah back. In the 3rd year of drought, the word of the Lord came again. "Go and present yourself to Ahab. I will soon send rain upon the land. Go and face Ahab." A kingdom desperate for water. The famine had become unbearable. Ahab and his steward Obadiah divided the land, searching desperately for water and enough grass to save the remaining animals. The famine was severe. Obadiah finds Elijah. As Obadiah searched the barren land, Elijah suddenly appeared before him. Falling to his knees, the astonished servant asked, "Is it truly you, my lord Elijah?" Obadiah found Elijah. A dangerous message. Elijah commanded, "Go and tell Ahab that I am here." But Obadiah trembled. "If you disappear, the king will accuse me, and I will die. Tell Ahab, I am here." Elijah's oath. Elijah answered, "As surely as the Lord Almighty lives, I will present myself to Ahab today." Strengthened by this promise, Obadiah returned to the king. "I will face Ahab today." Troubler of Israel. When Ahab saw Elijah, anger consumed him. Pointing at the prophet, the king demanded, "Is that you, the man who has brought trouble upon Israel? Is that you, troubler of Israel?" Elijah answers the king. Elijah answered without fear, "I have not troubled Israel. You and your father's house abandoned the Lord's commands and followed the false gods of Baal. You have abandoned the Lord." The challenge at Mount Carmel. Elijah stands fearlessly before King Ahab, pointing toward Mount Carmel. Elijah, summon all Israel to Mount Carmel and bring the prophets of Baal and Asherah. Today, Israel will know who is truly God. No. The challenge was declared. One prophet would stand against hundreds, and heaven itself would deliver the verdict. The challenge was declared. The gathering at Mount Carmel. From every corner of Israel, the people gathered upon Mount Carmel. Before them stood Elijah, one prophet of the Lord, against hundreds who served Baal. Beneath the darkening sky, the nation waited for a decisive confrontation. Choose whom you will serve. Elijah stepped before the silent nation and cried, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." Yet the people answered nothing. One prophet against 450. Elijah declared, "I am the only prophet of the Lord standing here, but Baal has 450 prophets. Bring us 2 bulls, and let the true God answer by fire." The crowd listened intensely. The challenge begins. 2 bulls were brought forward. Elijah allowed Baal's prophets to choose first. They prepared their sacrifice, placed it upon the wood, and lit no fire. Now their God would have to answer them. "Baal, answer us!" From morning until noon, Baal's prophets cried, "Baal, answer us!" They shouted and danced wildly around the altar. But the wood remained cold. There was no voice, no answer, and no fire. Elijah mocks Baal. At noon, Elijah mocked them. "Shout louder. Surely Baal is a god? Perhaps he is thinking, traveling, sleeping, or must be awakened." Humiliated and desperate, the prophets cried even louder. No voice, no answer. The prophets continued their frenzy until the evening sacrifice. They wounded themselves according to their custom and cried with all their strength. Yet there was no voice, no answer, and no one paid attention. Elijah rebuilds the altar. At the evening sacrifice, Elijah called, "Come near to me." Before the watching nation, he repaired the Lord's broken altar, using 12 stones, one representing each of the tribes descended from Jacob. The altar is prepared. Elijah arranged the wood, placed the sacrifice upon the altar, and dug a deep trench around it. Every detail was prepared before the watching crowd. But Elijah's most astonishing command was still to come. Drenched with water, Elijah commanded, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it over the sacrifice." He ordered this 3 times. Water soaked the offering, flooded the wood, covered the stones, and completely filled the trench. Elijah's prayer. Elijah prayed, "Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God, and that I am your servant. Answer me, Lord, so these people will know that you are turning their hearts back." Fire falls from heaven. Suddenly, the fire of the Lord thundered from heaven. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the dust, then swallowed every drop of water in the trench. The impossible had happened. The Lord, He is God. When the people witnessed the fire, they fell face down upon the mountain and cried with one voice, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." At last, Israel's heart turned back to Him. Judgment on the false prophets. Elijah commanded, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one escape." The people captured them and led them down to the Kishon Valley, where judgment fell upon those who had corrupted Israel. The sound of heavy rain. Elijah turned to Ahab and declared, "Go, eat and drink, for I hear the sound of a mighty rainstorm." The sky remained dry, but Elijah could already hear what faith promised was coming. Elijah prays for rain. Elijah climbed to Mount Carmel's summit, bowed to the ground, and placed his face between his knees. Then he told his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." Elijah prayed while the servant watched. Nothing yet. The servant returned and said, "There is nothing." 6 times Elijah sent him back to look, and 6 times the horizon remained empty. Still, Elijah refused to surrender. He continued praying in faith. A cloud like a man's hand. On the 7th journey, the servant suddenly cried, "A small cloud is rising from the sea, no larger than a man's hand." To others it seemed insignificant, but Elijah recognized the beginning of God's answer. "Prepare the chariot." Elijah immediately commanded his servant, "Tell Ahab, prepare your chariot and descend before the rain stops you." The tiny cloud rapidly expanded, and darkness began racing across the sky. The drought breaks. Within moments, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind began to roar, and heavy rain poured upon the land. After years of drought, Israel lifted its face toward heaven and received God's mercy. Elijah outruns the chariot. Then the power of the Lord came upon Elijah. Gathering his mantle around him, the prophet ran through the storm, outracing Ahab's royal chariot all the way to the entrance of Jezreel. Ahab reports to Jezebel. Inside Jezreel's palace, Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how the prophets of Baal had fallen. As the storm raged outside, the queen's grief hardened into deadly anger. Jezebel's deadly 3. Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, declaring, "By this time tomorrow, your life will be like one of those prophets." In a single moment, celebration became danger, and Elijah's courage was shaken. Elijah flees. Afraid for his life, Elijah fled far south to Beersheba. There he left his servant behind and walked alone into the wilderness. The prophet who had faced hundreds now felt frightened, exhausted, and completely alone. Broken beneath the broom tree, after walking a full day into the wilderness, Elijah collapsed beneath the broom tree. Overwhelmed and exhausted, he prayed, "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life." Then he lay down and fell asleep, touched by an angel. Suddenly, an angel touched Elijah and said, "Arise and eat." Beside him was warm bread and a jar of water. In Elijah's darkest moment, God did not condemn him. He gently cared for him. Strength for the journey. The angel returned and touched Elijah again. Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. Strengthened by that food, Elijah traveled 40 days and nights toward Horeb, the mountain of God. Wind, earthquake, and fire. At Horeb, a mighty wind shattered the mountains, but the Lord was not in the wind. Then came an earthquake and fire, yet God was not in them. Afterward, everything became completely still. The gentle whisper. Then Elijah heard God in a gentle whisper, "You are not alone." 7,000 in Israel remained faithful. Restored and recommissioned, Elijah stepped from the cave, ready to continue the work God had prepared. Elijah's legacy. Elisha's story reminds us that God answers with power, restores the exhausted, and speaks through quiet moments. When fear says the journey is over, God can renew our strength and send us forward again. Elijah's journey teaches us that the God who answers by fire also speaks through a gentle whisper. He confronts falsehood, restores broken hearts, provides strength for the exhausted, and remains faithful when we feel alone. Whatever challenge stands before you, continue praying and trusting, because God is not finished with your story. If Elijah's story strengthened your faith, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on all notifications. Share this documentary with someone who needs to remember that the Lord is God and that He still answers prayer.